Today we're delivering on something that's been talked about, but this is the first time the state of New York has made such an unprecedented commitment into the families and children of the city of New York. And we're not going backwards. We are committed.
This commitment to universal childcare has the potential to supercharge our economy. We will support and grow our workforce, we will grow our tax revenue, and we will grow as a city.
Welcome to New York One's Off Topic on Politics. I'm New York One reporter Bobby Cuza. The dynamic duo, Mayor Zohran Mamdani and Governor Kathy Hochul, are linking arms again, making two joint appearances this week here in the city to champion their plans for universal childcare and announcing which areas of the city will see the first 2K seats when the program begins to roll out this fall. We will talk about that and the ongoing push in Albany to tax the rich. Then a city council member with a knack for inflammatory and offensive language may have really gotten herself into trouble this time. The council's ethics committee is moving forward with possible disciplinary action against Queens City Councilwoman Vicky Palladino, who says any such action is a violation of her free speech rights. And joining me now for the conversation is New York One Statehouse reporter Bernadette Hogan. She is not in the State House at the moment. I see you a lot here in the city.
I know, I'm allowed to be in the 5 boroughs. Thank you for having me.
That call is actually made by our boss, Bob Hardt, our New York One political director, who is also here. Welcome, Bob.
It's good to be here. You're all fired. It's just my podcast. Me talking for half an hour by myself.
Oh, Bobby wanted to ask for a raise.
Yeah.
You know, I like to laugh at all of Bob's jokes when he's here on the podcast. And I also wanted to mention to you, I was being extra careful this week because in my mind, I was wrestling with whether to use the word Islamophobic when I describe Vicky Palladino, because I think by almost any definition of the term, a lot of her social media posts could be described as Islamophobic, but I know we kind of try to be careful with that sort of charged language in our line of work. But I'll read some of her posts later and let our viewers and listeners judge for themselves. All right, let's talk about universal childcare, which is obviously was a central campaign promise of Mayor Mamdani and a huge priority of Governor Kathy Hochul's. So, Bernadette, you were with the two of them earlier this week. They love to talk about this. And I guess let's get through some of the nuts and bolts first, because they announced the neighborhoods where the first seats are going to be. That was really the only news in the announcement, right?
That was the news, and also just going back to January when they first announced, hey, we have a deal to start a portion of this program. You know, the big question was, well, where? And they only have 2,000 seats within the first year, 12,000 seats in the second year. The state's supposed to pay for the whole thing, cost under $500 million, but still it's a lot of money. But the big thing is that all 4 boroughs except Staten Island will get seats by next September. And it is a big deal because, again, the city already has 3K, but nothing for 2-year-olds. And Mamdani ran on a platform of bringing free childcare to infants 6 weeks old up to toddlers 5 years old. This gets at just a sliver of that. However, again, you need to have time to get this program up and running, get the necessary staffers. City Hall had a request for proposals out to nonprofits and also home-based providers that closed, I believe, in February, asking what their capabilities and capacity would be. One of the questions I asked Emmy Liss, who is the executive director of the mayor's office for, I think, family, whatever the acronym is. But either way, she's the top dog over there in City Hall dealing with this. And I said, well, how do you determine these neighborhoods? And then also the providers, if already there is a disconnect in care or a lack of care. And she said that, number one, a lot of these families just have to pay out of pocket. So if you have nonprofits that are able to be bolstered by city dollars, then that kind of opens up the playing field and opportunities for families.
I think one of the things you see with the neighborhoods, though, is it's not all just poor people. They have middle class, and I'd say wealthy neighborhoods. Riverdale in the Bronx, which is one of the wealthier neighborhoods in the city, is there. Sure, you have Far Rockaway, but you have all the Rockaways. So that means you have Neponset and Breezy Point. So what this has done is created a built-in constituency. You finally have neighborhoods with names. It's not this amorphous policy proposal by the mayor and the governor. And so you have now created the beginning of a constituency of people who want this.
Right.
And then that means their neighbors are going to want it. And so I think this was a very smart thing to do. I mean, they have to do it eventually anyways, but I think it was just a big, big deal because suddenly it's real. If you live in these neighborhoods, this is something that's coming your way.
Yeah, and just to list some of the neighborhoods, this is not totally comprehensive, but in Upper Manhattan, Washington Heights and Inwood and some of the surrounding areas, Hamilton Heights, I think, included. In the Bronx, you mentioned Riverdale, also Fordham and Kingsbridge. In Brooklyn, Canarsie, Brownsville, Ocean Hill, and then the Rockaways, and also up to Ozone Park, Woodhaven. So it's it encompasses a lot of different communities.
It's a diverse, it's sort of how I think NYC Ferry might always survive, because it's not a ferry to one neighborhood.
Yeah.
It's a bunch of interest groups. It's a bunch of different residential interest groups.
Right.
And that's what's happened here is it's an incredible mix, with the exception of Staten Island. It's an incredible mix of neighborhoods. And now you've united them all behind one thing.
It is so complicated to roll out 2K or 2Care as they have sort of tried to brand it, because it's like this crazy quilt of providers, right? You have home childcare providers, you have childcare centers, you have 2K programs. Like I'm thinking my kids went to a 2K program that was in more of like a traditional preschool setting. And I don't even understand. And I've asked some of the Mamdani officials about this, and I don't know that they even haven't really have this figured out yet. Like, what are they actually doing? Are they adding new seats? Are they taking the existing seats and paying for them, where people, were paying out of pocket?
For 3K, I know this because our daughter did 3K, and it was great. It saved us, I don't know, $15,000 to $25,000, whatever it is. And in that case, some of the slots at the 3K provider were reserved for the new program. And so the caregiver was getting reimbursed by the city. The problem that Mayor Adams created was that for whatever reason, some of these vouchers or reimbursements were delayed. And this wasn't like you weren't paying some big company. You're paying like this, like we're paying some of these mom and pop.
Right.
So that's the key thing. And obviously the rollout was checkered at best for 3K, but where it succeeded, it went really, really well. But the problem was some neighborhoods needed it and didn't get it, and vice versa. And other neighborhoods had too many seats that didn't need them.
And I think with the way they're rolling this out, with just capping it at 2,000 seats in year one, and then, just the 5 different school districts, they'll be able to judge interest, because you could have the situation where more parents more students apply than there are even seats for, so they can gauge interest, and then they can also gauge, if you're talking to a home-based provider or a nonprofit that's already doing some of this work, they can see what their capacity is and be able to fill in the gaps. So they kind of are benefiting from the fact that this is a pilot program and it's a trial by error, and then they're able to move up to 12,000 seats by year 2. They're not saying, hey, we'll be able to serve every single 2-year-old in the city by year 2. Mamdani said that his goal is by year 4.
Right. I mean, we have all been, I think, skeptical of sort of the theatrics of this. I mean, his first week, I think, in office back in January, the mayor and the governor held this joint announcement where it almost seemed like mission accomplished. We have universal childcare, when really it's very incremental. 2,000 seats this year, 12,000 seats next year. And like you said, it is a lot of money. $75 million towards the program this year, and I think $425 million
for year 2
next year.
The whole.
But that is far from comprehensive. We'll see if they actually get it done in 4 years. On the other hand, this is a real first step, and in a world where this does actually get built out and come to fruition, this is a huge deal, right? I mean, this would be a legacy-making project for both Mamdani and for Hochul, right?
Just like 3K was for de Blasio.
Right.
I mean, that when you're writing
Pre-K. Universal pre-K.
Pre-K and then 3K. And then 3K.
Yeah.
It will be a huge deal. It does put pressure indirectly, though, right, on the governor, because suddenly every neighborhood's going to want this, and they're going to have to find out a way to pay for all of this.
And not just in the 5 boroughs, also
Statewide,
throughout the entire state, which she admitted on Tuesday when I was there. She said upstate's going to be behind. And she was actually not even talking about just 2K. She was talking about 3K and 4K.
And 4K.
Because it's different in upstate districts. I mean, there's either less seats, there's just different challenges outside the 5 boroughs between even getting to schools and what have you. So the governor has a bigger problem, number one being how do you find revenue to pay for a fully built out program, not just in New York City, but all throughout the state? In New York City, it's estimated to be a high of, I think, $6 or $7 billion annually. And then if you build it out to the whole statewide program, $15 billion is the number that's estimated, but nobody really knows because, again, we don't have this yet.
Right.
So the governor, when I asked her on Tuesday, well, what happens after year 2? How are you going to pay for it? She said, oh, well, we can't budget too far in advance. And it's like, well, you know what's going to happen is, are you going to pull the plug after year 2? But they don't want to talk about this yet because it brings up the big sticking point, which is
She might not have a job.
she might not have a job, she might be unemployed, but also raising taxes on
Right.
the wealthy,
Yeah.
and then also on big corporations. The governor's very concerned about losing out on, the wealthier New Yorkers that do pay a huge portion of our taxes,
Well-
right? Or they offset it, I suppose,
Well,
for the
this
little
is-
guys over here.
This is a good segue because my next question was going to be, you have the governor and the mayor making these joint appearances.
Right.
And it seems like everything's great between the two of them, but is there any awkwardness because we know that the mayor is pushing to tax the wealthy and the governor has been pretty adamant that she doesn't want to?
Well, the mayor rolled out his budget proposal, said there's a high of $15 billion in a deficit. And then that slimmed down to 7, and now it's slimmed down to about $5.5 billion. Still a big amount of money. And he said that's just for baseline operations, not even for new spending, not even for his free buses or for the childcare, for anything else. It's just to be able to run the city as it is. And he's blaming Adams and he's blaming former Governor Andrew Cuomo. But the spotlight does fall on Governor Hochul because he says the best way to get this done is to raise taxes on the wealthy and on corporations. And if not, we're going to have to raise property taxes, which politically speaking is a massive bomb being thrown at all the homeowners, no matter where you live or what part of the city you come from or your economic level, because that's lobbing a bomb, I suppose, at people's their ability to stay in the city. But when asked, the governor, it's funny to see the two of them appearing together after Mamdani made this budget presentation, because one could argue, well, Mamdani is blaming Hochul for his inability to fill those budget gaps. And behind the scenes, I think the Hochul administration, the way it's been described, is that she was a little surprised at how he kind of came out that way. But then others on the flip side say that he's also kind of over his skis here because there are other ways to get savings, I suppose, in the city budget.
I mean, they're just kicking the can down the road a little bit. Today's Thursday, and Hochul and the mayor did another event together today. Mm-hmm. And Hochul's obsessed with the de Blasio Cuomo dysfunction.
Right.
She even referenced it today. It's funny.
She
It's like,
brings it up all the time.
She's like trolling them, like, see, we get along, unlike other governors and mayors.
Yeah.
Andrew
I
Cuomo,
know.
Bill de Blasio, And it's just, so I think even if she's ready to strangle the mayor, which I don't think she ever will be, at least not now, she's still going to create this happy-go-lucky front. And I think they both realize, let's see where we are after, if Hochul gets reelected, where we are after that.
Right.
And then we'll come up with a fiscal plan.
Right.
But it is so silly when she says to you, oh, I'm not planning 2 years out. We get these budget documents that are planning for out years all the time.
We have out year gaps that are actually way bigger than the ones that are presented to us within the next 2 years for 3 and 4.
So after 9/11, Michael Bloomberg, when he became mayor in 2002, was repeatedly asked, well, there's a huge budget problem with the city because of 9/11. Aren't you going to have to raise property taxes? And he just wouldn't answer it. And once George Pataki, because they were buddies, was reelected, suddenly a year later, we heard about property taxes.
Right.
And I think that there might be a similar thing going on with Hochul and the legislature, that if they're all reelected, then we'll hear about something.
Right. And the best thing that they could have done also was going back to the childcare announcement on January 7th or 8th, where they said, listen, we've come up with a deal and we're going to do this. Because the governor has a budget coming up. Technically, the deadline's April 1st. It has not been passed by April 1st since the governor has been the governor. It's usually in May. But, it kind of has nullified a little bit Mamdani's push in Albany. He sent a briefing document earlier this week up to lawmakers, and it's a bunch of asks. Hey, we need you to raise taxes because the city needs money. The city needs money. But just talking to individual members and even those that are in contact with legislative leaders, they say, listen, even though we've pushed on the millionaires tax and the corporations, raising the corporate rate, they kind of, it's almost like the governor moved pretty early and outmaneuvered that push, which she knew she could anticipate, and says, well, listen, I'm going to give you this huge win with childcare. So she might be in luck with not having to do anything on taxes this year, but you never know.
There's a Siena poll out this week, and one of the questions was about taxing the wealthy, specifically taxing millionaires in New York City. And it's over. I mean, this always polls well, but the numbers are actually kind of shocking. I mean, by a 25-point margin, New York State voters support the idea of raising personal income taxes on city residents making at least $1 million. So 54 in favor, 29% against. That number goes way up within New York City and among Democrats. Democrats support it 72% to 13%. It's also popular in the suburbs. And then once you narrow it to independents, independents are opposed. Republicans, of course, are opposed. But this is, for something that polls this well, there is a lot of resistance from not just Kathy Hochul, but elected officials across the board to ever raise taxes, especially in an election year. But maybe it's something, like you said, Bob, that maybe a year from now, when it's not an election year, is something that's more palatable. But Kathy Hochul also says we don't need this, right? There's enough, that we have enough money. Why are we going to raise taxes just for the sake of raising taxes?
Well, for this year. If we expand it,
right,
you have to find the money somewhere. Most people aren't millionaires, so that's why I think it polls well. I mean, I think it's that simple. I also think, though, it's easy to make a 30-second ad saying tax and spend Kathy Hochul. And so she doesn't want to have to deal with that. Right now, she's without getting any more votes than she's at above 50% already in the Siena poll. So she's got what she needs, and she doesn't want to risk losing that. So I think it's going to be a very careful campaign. And why take any chances? You're going to win a few Republican votes. You're going to win independent votes. Why risk losing any of them and have some business group attack you?
And she was up, you said 50% against Blakeman.
Yes, against Bruce Blakeman.
Against Bruce Blakeman, she's up 51 to 31, so a 20-point lead on Blakeman, which is actually a little bit smaller than her lead the last Siena poll, but still 20 points is pretty good. But Bern, I was going to ask you also, next week, the State Senate and the State Assembly come out with their what's called their one house bills, which is nothing binding, but it's basically it's sort of their starting negotiating position for the budget. This is what they want. And they're both going to put forward a tax hike on the wealthy, right?
Yeah.
Although do they do that every year? Is that
Since I've been covering Albany, yes, which is 10 years, right? Like, they have always put in some sort of tax hike on corporations and then the millionaires tax. And it really, was not a real thing within the last couple of years, but it has gotten more, I guess, legitimized with additional sponsors as this idea has become more popular. And now, especially with Zohran Mamdani as the mayor, it definitely has more of wings. However, again, the governor has the most power in the budget, and she has already said no. And the legislature, this has been the big question, asking the leaders, is this going to be your big ask? But they also have members that are up for re-election too, and a lot of them are facing primaries from those on the left. This is a problem for especially Speaker Carl Hastie in the Assembly if he wants to maintain a constituency that he can control, a diverse Democratic body. And, those on the left continue to primary those on the right. Anyway, so I guess the point is they always put their counter-proposal forward. They always say there's a lot more money than what the executive says, and we can also do a lot more, but then it's up to the governor to moderate it. And she has already put her line in the sand.
What about Donald Trump riding to the rescue, the child care guru? I mean, it's just amazing. Imagine if that would be the ultimate Mamdani move.
On his next White House visit.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to leave that conversation there. When we come back, we're going to talk about the case against Queens City Councilwoman Vicky Palladino, who may have gone too far this time with her inflammatory statements about Muslims and about Mayor Mamdani in particular. All right, I just looked up Islamophobe in the dictionary. It says, a person with a dislike of or prejudice against Islam or Muslims, especially as a political force. So that's what Google spit up when I searched on it. Let me read you a few of Vicky Palladino's social media posts over the past year or so, because there have been very many that I think a lot of people found offensive or Islamophobic. I think the one that got her the most in trouble was back in December when she talked about the need. I'll just read it to you. She said, "We need to take very seriously the need to begin the expulsion of Muslims from Western nations, or at the very least, the severe sanction of them within Western borders." And then that got her in trouble with the city council speaker and just in trouble generally with the public that found this offensive. And then she sort of doubled down.
But didn't she delete that one?
I think she deleted that one when Julie Menon, who was the incoming speaker of the council, asked her nicely, I guess, to pull it down, and she did. But then she doubled down in this op-ed that she wrote where she talked about mass deportations of radical Muslims and those who support them, even passively. And then she went on to say, "This may indeed result in massive sweeps of Muslim neighborhoods. So be it." Then there was one, then you go even further back. There was a lot about Mamdani during the campaign. I think before he even got elected, she said, "Let's just talk about how insane it is to elect someone to any major office who hasn't even been a U.S. citizen for 10 years. And then later goes on to say, "Deport." So we're going to deport Zohran Mamdani, who's a U.S. citizen. There were some other ones.
Longer than 10 years, too.
There were some other ones going further back where she basically advocates for killing communists. So it's not just Muslims she's gone after.
And then he could be a communist and feel threatened by her, right?
Right. And then more recently, I think just in the past couple of weeks, Mamdani named a new commissioner for the mayor's office of immigrant affairs. This woman, Faiza Ali, I believe is her name. And this woman, by the way, was born and raised in Brooklyn. And Palladino says, "New York is under foreign occupation. There's really no other way to put it. Does this administration have one single actual American in it?" So,
meaning like a white person, I guess, is what she's.
So that's just to sort of paint the picture of the background of all this. Now she has been charged by the city council's Committee on Standards and Ethics. So now, she's never really been censured for any of this. She has been, a lot of people have issued statements condemning her, and she has lost some committeeships, right? So, and including when Julie Menon became the city council speaker just a couple months ago, when she assigned city council members to the various committees, Palladino was only on 2 of them. She had been on 7 of them before. So, clearly she has been sort of disfavored, I guess, by the council leadership. But only now is this being taken up by the ethics committee, which could actually, impose some kind of discipline, whether that's a fine. Conceivably, she could be suspended or even expelled from the council. I think that would be sort of unprecedented for it to be expelled just for stuff that you said. But in this case, it seems like pretty extreme. I don't know.
The ethics committee often is moribund. Like, is this committee doing anything? And then when they have done stuff, it's like someone grabbed someone's butt or stole money or did something. So it wasn't an issue of something where they was just saying something on social media. Right. So this is a new frontier for the committee. On the other hand, Twitter or X, I guess we call it now, hasn't been around for that long in the course of human history. But this is a first. On the other hand, you could say if you were a Muslim employee of the city council, you could say, I don't feel like this is a safe work environment because one of my employers or supervisors or whatever she is thinks I should leave the country. And so to me, this is like a great debate between what your workplace rules are. Like, we certainly couldn't post that. We'd all be fired because we're news people. Obviously, you have the free speech, the First Amendment, and you can say whatever you want. But does this create a problem in your work office? And Ayanna Harry talked to a workplace lawyer, and it could easily or potentially fall within the workplace rules.
Right. And how does that change also with Palladino being an elected official?
Right.
And the council's ability to move to expel which you mentioned Andy King before, which you need to explain that more. I don't remember covering that.
It was sexual harassment.
It was actually a bunch of things.
Yeah.
It was sexual
it was a lot of
harassment,
things.
and there was misuse of public funds,
Right.
and then there was retaliation against a whistleblower. There was like a
Right.
whole
Yeah.
laundry list of things why he got expelled.
Good times. Yeah.
Right. I didn't cover that. I was not here. But what I did cover was when Ina Vernikoff, the Republican councilwoman from Brooklyn, had a gun at a different protest. And also this went before the ethics committee. And nothing was really done. Nothing really came of that. And I
Right.
remember talking to council staffers at the time who were saying, well, it also leads to a slippery slope of, and this was a Democrat that was speaking to me, of, well, what could fall underneath the definition of what is worthy of sanctioning, right? But that was one key example in recent years, and then now obviously Palladino's comments on social media, which there's been a steady stream of.
I mean, there's members of Congress who probably a lot of them who could have gotten flagged with stuff they put. If that's the standard, like
Sure.
If you would go through some members of Congress, I think there'd be a few that would fall under this new Palladino rule. I mean, it's one thing to say like, I don't know, like communism sucks. It's another thing to say communists should die or whatever. Not that she's saying that.
Yeah.
But the Muslim, that's where I think she's into a danger zone is if you're saying all Muslims should be expelled.
Right.
And,
And
you
also,
have Muslim employees or coworkers.
yes.
That's
and
where
also
you
if
get in
you're,
trouble.
I mean, free speech has its limits, right? I mean, if you're inciting violence, I'm looking at the one post where she doesn't say communists should be killed exactly, but she reposts this meme of people being thrown out of a helicopter. This is like a right-wing meme, and suggests that.
So if you're a communist employee, then you might feel of the council, you might feel unsafe.
And by the way, the actual charge that was made by the ethics committee, she was charged with engaging in disorderly behavior and violating the council's anti-harassment and discrimination policy. So yeah, again, I mean, I'm not a First Amendment lawyer, but it's one thing to be, she can say what she wants, right? But if she's violating the workplace rules, and then, but again, it's complicated by the fact she's a public official. Also, by the way, she can get thrown out of office if people don't like the stuff that she says.
That too, right? Out of the
Yeah, and Ayanna went to the neighborhood and it was a mixed bag. There were some people who thought it was great and some people thought it was horrific.
And to be clear, she is totally unapologetic. I mean, there's no apologies.
Well, she took that down though.
She did take the one down, although then later she criticized Menon because Menon had spoken out against her at a news conference. So,
But isn't this great for her? If you want to be like a national conservative firebrand, you're getting all this attention in the nation's largest city.
Yeah.
You become a martyr if you get disciplined.
she could be a regular on Fox.
Right, she could be a regular on Fox News.
And also, I mean, Vicky Palladino, as brash as she is and controversial, I think I haven't had a lot of interactions with her, but she's not a totally disliked person, even among her council colleagues who are Democrats.
Correct.
Right? I mean, our coworker Dan Rivoli has talked about this. You go to the council, you see her chumming it up with some of the Democrats.
all
right?
the Republicans do,
And
frankly.
so it's not like she's some pariah in the council, but obviously there's been, blanket condemnation of all the stuff that she said.
I think the biggest, potential losers here would be the constituents because, right, if she's getting stripped of all her committeeships, being on this committee or that committee, then she has less of a say for, or say, for example, Julie Menon takes more punitive actions and says, well, you know what, I'm not earmarking this or that, or I'm not approving funding into your district, which would be, they could do whatever they want.
Yeah.
But yeah, she could end up pulling any funding for a park, a playground, a nonprofit, relegate Vicky Palladino's office to the basement, and
Where our office, where our desk is at City Hall.
That happened to Sal Albanese, the city councilman
Yeah.
under Peter Vallone. He was a contrarian, Albanese, and even though they're both Democrats, Vallone basically put Albanese. I went to his office once, and it was basically like a closet.
Yeah, that happened all the time in Albany. It used to be.
It happened in Office Space, that movie.
Yes.
For fans.
Bob did that to you. So awkward.
After this podcast, maybe. All right, guys, we are going to leave it there. That is going to do it for this week's episode. You can always watch us on Inside City Hall, Mondays through Fridays at 7 p.m. on New York One. And we love your feedback. Send us an email at yourstoryn1@charter.com. You can subscribe to Off Topic wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you're hearing or watching, leave us a review. Thanks to our producer, Anthony Roman, and thanks for listening, everybody. We will see you next week.